This is Manu, this time on the other end of the of the what is that? A speaker, I guess. But anyways, welcome to the Reframe series. I am going to interview our co-founder of Rethink Desi, Arpita Sharma. Thank you, Arpita, for being here today. And if you guys enjoy these conversations, please don't forget to click like and subscribe, and we can continue doing this work. So, hi, Arpita. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, this is exciting. Yeah, because we also realized that we didn't actually do this. We haven't interviewed each other and stuff and talked about our work that we do on the side. And so, yeah, so I'm going to read a little bit about you and then we'll get into some questions. Is that cool?
Yep.
All right. So Arpita holds a dual master's degree in public policy and planning from the University of Southern California and a BA in Development Studies with a minor in Global Poverty and Practice from the University of California, Berkeley. Arpita is interested in helping nonprofits, local governments, and philanthropy groups better understand issues of immigrant integration and racial justice, economic inclusion and climate equity, and social movements and governing power. Prior to joining the Equity Research Institute team, she conducted quantitative and qualitative research on policy issues related to capital access for minority entrepreneurs and small business owners at the Milken Institute. She also worked as a research analyst at Estelano Leysara Advisors, where she assisted in implementing active transportation projects for LA Metro and developing an equitable economic development plan for Cathedral City. Arpita's passion for social justice work began in her youth when she learned the importance of empathy, compassion, and advocacy as a first-generation immigrant living with a brother with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, with strength and beauty. Since then, she has worked with several organizations both in the United States and India to help solve challenges in education, health, and economic development. Boom, I feel like we need to do a mic drop. You are a rock star. You're also a candidate in Black Belt. Who are you?
Thanks, Manu.
Yeah, you are totally a rock star. So tell me, what inspired you to do this kind of work?
Yeah, so it actually started off, I started off going down this pathway because when I was growing up, I had a brother with a genetic terminal illness. And when you experience that, it kind of makes you realize that there are certain things that you really value in life. And so for me, I really wanted to have a career of service that was going to help people in some way. And so when I got to UC Berkeley, I knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't necessarily have a concept of what. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a genetic scientist. And then I realized in high school that you have to kill mice and dissect animals. And so I kind of threw off that career pathway, which I'm very grateful to the people who do that research. I just didn't have it in me to do that. But when I got to Berkeley, I started taking classes around global poverty and practice and really understanding our global history and the inequality that's existed in the world. And it just struck me as something that really opened my eyes to what the world was like and the challenges that people experience based on where they grow up. And it made me really want to understand and figure out how to solve these types of challenges. And I think a lot of people kind of come into the world with this desire to change and improve the world. My challenge was actually figuring out, how do I make this possible for myself while also being a first generation immigrant and trying to support my family, and also coming from, I guess, in the US, what you would define as a low income community. So I learned a lot in that process about kind of the importance of collaborating with community, of working together to solve challenges, and what does that look like, and how to approach it in a way that isn't so much focused on self-promotion, but really trying to focus and foster a sense of deep connection and community that promotes growth. So after I graduated, I both worked in India for a summer. So I got a Global Poverty in Practice Fellowship to do work with the India Alliance for Child's Rights, which was a national organization in India that was working on maternal and child's rights issues. And I got to see and really better understand the landscape of the issues within the Indian context. And I think that for me was really eye-opening because I had I came to the US when I was 6, and I had never really gone back to India because of our family situation with my brother. And so when I went and I was doing this work, I was both volunteering with an organization in India called Mera Sahara, where I had been fundraising money for them through Asha for Education for 3 years prior to that. And then at the same time, I was doing this work with the India Alliance for Child's Rights, where we were working on policy issues and kind of gathering a lot of feedback from community organizations across India around education and just access to access to resources for these different groups, and what does safety and health look like in these communities. And there was just such a sharp contrast between the experiences within a school in Natari village, where you go and you're in the middle of a hot summer and there's no access to electricity. It's frequently going out. All of the kids are sitting on the floor studying. And then these high-level theoretical discussions around things like child labor and whether that should be allowed or not. And at the same time experiencing kids not even having enough to eat and needing to work at 7 or 8 years old to be able to support their families. So it just kind of showed me how big of a challenge I would be getting myself into. And I was like, I need to focus in on the local context that I know. And when I actually have skills that I can contribute, I can come back. So I went back, and at the time I had moved back home to San Bernardino because I knew my brother wasn't going to live very long. And then I was also looking for work in the middle of a recession, which is around 2008, 2009, when all of this recession stuff was happening. It was very difficult for students who had graduated to get jobs. So I came back and I worked odd jobs for about a year, and I did internships. And then finally I got a position doing community organizing work with an organization called the Institute for Public Strategies. And this was really interesting because they had received $1 million federal grant to reduce crime and violence in a targeted portion of the city of San Bernardino. And I was coming in to basically knock on doors of residents, of businesses, and get them to come to meetings together to figure out how to build a sense of safety in the community and how to actually create a healthier and more vibrant community. So I got that opportunity to both learn about a theory of change model that they were using, which was really interesting and unique in that it approached social change from a very comprehensive way, but also be on the ground and get to kind of implement the ideas that I had been learning in the classroom at Berkeley. And in that process, it inspired me to actually want to pursue a degree in public policy and later on urban planning, so that I could take on more leadership in these types of organizations. So I ended up coming to the University of Southern California and doing that. And there's a lot of pieces in between, but since then I have ended up at the Equity Research Institute, where I get to do really interesting research and work that provides demographic data to different organizations, local governments, philanthropy groups around the changing landscape for immigrants, around the issues around racial justice, and then also thinking about what it means to build an inclusive economy and what role community organizations and community organizing groups have to play in that. So it's been a really interesting journey, and that's kind of where I've been for the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's really cool. You've had like a kind of like a landscape of experiences in the field of like, public policy, economics, development, public health, like all of these like varied sort of determinants of health too, right? And social inequities you've seen in different sort of perspective, and not only from that, but also from your own perspective and your own lived experience on top of that. Yeah, I tell you that I was in new student orientation like last week, and someone actually put the Bay Area Equity Atlas in the chat as like a resource for understanding Indigenous communities and sort of how much of them like, and what their population like sort of structure is, and like how many are where, and like their demographics essentially across the US also, right? And it was like, well, this is specific for California, and you can see like, whose land we're on and whose land, unceded territory we occupy. So it was like really interesting to just kind of like bridge those two together, because I like clicked on it and I was like, oh, I think this is where Arpita is actually working. And yeah, your photo like showed up, so it was like really cool.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's so cool to hear. I'm going to share this with all of my coworkers.
You should, because it's also, sometimes there are unforeseen ways in which things can work, right? And it's interesting how you also mentioned where like you saw that the conversations at like sort of the ivory tower or the board meeting, or like, sort of the analogies that we kind of have in business, right? And were happening in actually what was on the ground. And so like, I feel like that's a challenge that you kind of acknowledged in your life, right? Is that you're like, these things are not resonating. There's also a lot of other things that are happening that make this issue very complex. So how do you like process that? How do you process your challenges, and how do you sort of go about it?
Yeah, so I think, and I've thought about this a lot. So first of all, let me just share for our viewers that I helped, and listeners, that I am one of the data analysts on a large team that helps contribute to the National Equity Atlas, the Bay Area Equity Atlas, and the California Immigrant Data Portal. And all of these websites provide information around different issues impacting communities across California and the United States. And we're really hoping that this data helps to shed light on the racial inequities that exist, the challenges that exist for immigrant communities, but also to provide just a deeper layer of understanding and knowledge about different communities. So whether that's at the city level, the county level, the regional level, or the state and national level. And I think this kind of gets to my approach and understanding of the work that I'm doing. So I think everyone has, like, when you've been in this work deep enough, I think we all have a theory of change that we use in order to think about like how our work is impacting and creating change in the world. And for one thing, the one key takeaway I would say that I've had is that Arpita alone, I'm not going to change the world. I can have as much impact as I can have in my lifetime, but this is a very collaborative piece of work that we are all doing together. And the thing that I can really do is I can help to contribute to the ecosystem in a way that pushes and advocates for this change to be able to happen using the skills and knowledge and expertise that I've gained over my lifetime. So I approach that from the angle of, okay, I want to really hone my skills in data analysis and then become that expert that can provide that knowledge and help shape those conversations. I've also thought about, like, in addition to the data itself, which is wonderful, but it doesn't necessarily move people to action, what are the ways that I can help to promote narrative change? And for me, that really it pushed me towards filmmaking as a pathway, and also art as a pathway, because I think sometimes you can communicate at a deeper level in a way that touches people's hearts through being able to tell stories and really share knowledge in that way, as opposed to having arguments around this piece of research, that piece of research, which is also extremely important. And we're both doing research work, so we know the value of that. But I think outside of an academic audience, I think sometimes that data can be lost without the context of the community that you're working in. So that's been my approach, is really like working on the data, but also thinking about how do we think about narrative change, and how do we use that to reach a wider audience. And I think similar to you, that's kind of the way that I have been thinking about it as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which also comes back to storytelling too, right? And so you want to talk about sort of your filmmaking journey as well?
Yeah. So I think similar to my life, my filmmaking journey has been kind of like, it's come from a strange place where I did this exercise, like, it's been like 5 or 6 years now, but I read online of like, how do you figure out like what you might be really passionate about? And one of the exercises to do that was actually like writing your own obituary. Mm. And so in my obituary, I had written that I wanted to be a researcher, artist, and filmmaker. Mm. And so I didn't know why, because I had never thought about myself doing filmmaking work before, but there was just something about it that was like, there's a part of me that knows that like I'm supposed to go down this pathway. And so when I started working at the Equity Research Institute, really great colleague of mine from grad school and coworker and we started taking filmmaking classes through Los Angeles City College. And the more I started working on it, the more I started to really get into it and just start thinking about like, what are the things that I can share? What are the stories and perspectives that I can provide through my work that no one else can provide, because they didn't grow up like me. They didn't have similar experience. And what are the things that I can humanize, whether it's like from my current life or whether it's from how I grew up. So I think a lot of that has resulted in me kind of creating short films with family and friends currently, and then also developing out larger life projects that I hope to do. And as you know, we're in the middle of applying to a bunch of grants for being able to create these types of projects. So I'm really hoping that in some way during my lifetime, I'm able to pursue these types of projects.
Yeah. And it's also not like from a documentary sort of standpoint, right? We're also looking at narrative fiction and sort of how are we not just representing South Asians also on screen, but also like really talking about these lived experiences and how we can all relate to one another, right? And like you said, humanizing our experiences as well. And yeah, that's great. I love your chutzpah. Is that what people say? I think that's what people say. But yeah, it's also interesting, like living, with a Punjabi speaking family and then actually being born and raised here around people who speak English. And then like, I totally like crosswire things all the time still. And I'm like almost 40. But, anyways, so it seems like that you're also very strategic as to how you sort of encounter your desires and how you want to pursue them, but then also how you sort of interact with them or want to engage with them. So what's your process of planning and how do you kind of formulate your structure?
Yeah. So for me, my life is all about trying to find the right balance in everything. And I think I think there's generally a push towards having an identity or being known for something when you're developing a career. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think because of like recognizing the importance of health and like well-being, and that being a very central piece of my life, knowing what like knowing how hard it can be when you don't have it through my personal experience. I really tried to center having and doing everything that I do in balance. So for work, I think I feel very lucky in that I have a very supportive work environment, and there's a kind of a very deep focus on learning and growing together and being very collaborative, which is like one of the things that I really love. I love about our work and our team. And so I think in that way that feels balanced. And then I also do Taekwondo in my spare time outside of work. And I've been doing that for like 5 or 6 years. And that helps me to maintain my health and has gotten me through a lot of challenging experiences in life because I had a healthy outlet for being able to deal with my frustrations. And so I continue that, and I have basically an accountability mechanism that I've built for myself so that I never become too off track. It was very challenging during the middle of the pandemic because I could not rely on that as much, but I pushed through and was able to get back into it and made it more of a priority. So on Wednesday, I'm not sure when we'll post this, but I am now officially a candidate for a black belt, which is something that I had never had the opportunity to pursue when I was younger. So I'm really excited and happy about that. And I think all women should learn self-defense. So I highly encourage you to do it if you get the chance. And then in addition to that, I love to paint and do artwork in my spare time. And I've also been doing that for several years. And more, it started off as a hobby where I've been kind of exploring different like artistic approaches and kind of just learning, self-teaching and self-learning. But more recently, I've actually started to take it seriously and like think about how can I sell pieces, but also how can I like teach others how to do it. So I've been working on videos here and there for that. And then the other part of it is doing this filmmaking and then podcasting work for Rethink Desi. So it's been for Rethink Desi, like it just started off as an experiment. A lot of these things just started off as like, it's the middle of a pandemic. I just want to do something and give it a shot. I'm going to explore this idea and see if I can actually like take it off the ground and like figure out how to implement it. And very slowly and kind of sporadically, I started doing these things. But we're now like several episodes in, and I'm actually like feeling committed. And so it's organically growing in that process. And then the same thing with the filmmaking work, where I think because I'm in a community with people like you, Manu, I'm learning how to develop and like push myself to like apply for these grants and then do this type of work and trying to develop that self-confidence. So it's all a process. I don't know if I'm, like where I will end up, but I do know that I am very happy in where I am and what I'm doing. And I think that's like very few people have that. So I feel very lucky to be in that position. I don't know how long it'll last, but I'm going to milk it for whatever it's worth. And I think Buddha always says like, success is not the key to happiness. Happiness is the key to success. If you love what you're doing, you're going to be successful. And so that's kind of my approach to life.
That's brave and beautiful, and really, I appreciate your candor a lot. And I think that's one of the things that I like really admire about you is that you like take for example, like you're trying to figure out how to sell your own art, but at the same time you're like, no, I want to like be able to also like show other people on how they can do this too, because we all need to be able to share our art, and so like you have a genuine interest in building a community. Like I feel like that's always the jump off point for you, and I admire that so much about you, because I know that you're looking to like build an alliance and be able to leverage everyone, and we don't really, that's something you kind of have to groom, in our capitalistic society. We're really told to be individualistic and kind of look out for just ourselves. But you're such a great example to be like, no, that's not what you have to do. What you need to do is sort of figure out how to really be in community and really kind of be in solidarity with people's struggles and understand them. And if anything, just be there, you know? Yeah, so valuable to hear that, and it's so refreshing. So thanks for sharing. So yeah, like I'm saying, you're very much an inspiration, and so I would love for you to share with our viewers and listeners if you have any sort of tips and strategies on how they can sort of approach life, academia, filmmaking, artistry, black belt. Like, you are a wealth of knowledge.
Thanks. I think one thing that I tend to advise people, like I do this to a lot of people that I end up being close to, is I will tell them like two things. One is, like, a long time ago when I was really struggling and to figure out where I wanted to go next in life, my friend Niku had recommended this book to me called Designing Your Life. And it's by two Stanford professors who really gives you a series of exercises that you can use to figure out like what is the pathway that you want to pursue and what most engages you and energizes you. So I would recommend reading that book. The second thing is I always like tell people that like you need to get a notebook and you need to start writing down all of your ideas, whether they're good or bad. Stop judging them and just like start writing down your ideas. And what I've noticed over the years is like just by allowing myself to have a judgment-free area where I'm able to like write down things that I feel like interested in or ideas that pop into my head, that I've actually been able to do them. And I've been able to start to completion, be able to develop out an idea that I had, an original idea, and then turn it into something. And in that process, I've gained a lot of self-confidence simply because I could do it. And so then that's kind of pushed me to go deeper and deeper. Like for my artwork, you know, I am willing to experiment and put myself in places that other people may never consider. Or even with Rethink Desi, this like concept is something that I felt the self-confidence to be able to try and push through, even though the quality of the video itself wasn't that great in the beginning. And as I'm doing these things, they're developing and formalizing and they're turning into something. But I had to first and foremost be able to say, I'm willing to do this, even though I'm really scared and I don't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be. And hopefully that helps other people to also kind of push through their own fears and anxieties. Because it's often very challenging when you get in your own head of like, oh my God, can I actually do something this like, you know, this big that I'm imagining? And sometimes you can, and sometimes you just do it in a very simple way.
Yeah, that is, and take it in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I loved being on this sort of journey of how you grew and learned and sharing that process. We don't really get to hear that many stories like that. And especially like, you know, sharing that there were times where, you know, we are questioning ourselves and we don't know what the next step is and stuff, but you just kind of chug along and you kind of figure it out as you're going and just don't give up, you know.
Yeah. Yes. And recognizing that you won't know until you try. So you might have ideas of what you think that you're going to like, and then you start doing those things and you're like, I really don't like this.
Right. Yeah.
And giving yourself the space and time to actually experiment and figure that out rather than getting into absolutes, which I think can be very easy to do when you're younger.
Yeah, especially when, you know, you don't have other mentors and stuff around either, right? To kind of hold your hand and stuff. And, you know, the pressure's real, you know, to like become an adult, become a responsible adult, become a paid adult, you know, so there's all of that too.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially like as someone who has a sick father as well, I'm trying to balance like all of the hospital appointments and then figuring out like managing and supporting our family is also something that I think about as well. And so that financial security aspect is always really important to me. But at the same time, I want to balance it with something that I feel very passionate about. And I think I've just been very lucky in that I was able to find something that allows me to do that.
And your strength also helped you find it. Your hustle is real.
Hustle's real.
Yeah, the hustle is real. And your hustle was definitely real, where you made the best of it and stuff and just kind of like found out what you like and what you don't like and gave enough breathing space for it and was gentle with yourself and knew that you had so many things going on otherwise. And there's a lot of emotional maturity there that you also have. But yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thank
you. Yeah, good to have you.
Good to be on this.
I know, but yeah, so click like or subscribe if you guys want to hear more conversations between Manu and Arpita, or between us and other folks too.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.